In this video, we're going to look at a couple of examples of using Vimshottari Dasa for seeing things manifest. So this way we can look at how it's worked in the past so that we can make future predictions using Vimshottari Dasa. All right, once again, thank you very much for watching my video. I really do appreciate you taking time out of your busy life to watch my humble little YouTube channel. And please like this video, share, subscribe, do the things that you do so well. And so we're looking at Vimshottari Dasa here. Now, I made a previous video. I'll put a link below where you can click on if you haven't seen this video about making predictions using Vimshottari Dasa. Well, this video we're going to do a couple of examples, and I've just randomly chosen, because it just happened to pop into my head, a couple of easy charts showing fourth house things being manifest. And so with fourth house things, one of these example charts is going to be about a house, and one of these example charts is going to be about using a vehicle. So one is going to be a house, one's going to be a vehicle. So there's a little bit of different karakas, and we'll get into that. So first and foremost, though, let's go ahead and revisit the rules of the Mahadasha Lord. So let's go ahead and look at this graphic. This is the same graphic that was in my Making Predictions video. Now, so first things first with the Mahadasha Lord. Mahadasha Lord, great dasha, it's the first primary dasha. So if you're looking at the Mahadasha Lord, if the Mahadasha Lord does not have an agenda for making an event manifest, then even if the Bhukti below it does, or the Antardasha Lord, which is the Bhukti, depending on which words you use, they mean the same thing. Anyway, so if the Bhukti has an agenda for it, but the Mahadasha Lord doesn't have an agenda for it, then just because the Bhukti does doesn't mean it's going to necessarily happen. Only if the Mahadasha Lord has it. So the Mahadasha Lord is kind of like the puppeteer. He holds the puppet strings of what's going to happen. The Antardasha Lords are basically just kind of like the puppets themselves. Anyhow, that's not necessarily the best analogy, and I apologize for that. But it just came to me, and I thought maybe it would work. But anyhow, you want the Mahadasha Lord to have the agenda. How do you know if the Mahadasha Lord has an agenda to make something manifest? Well, very simple. If a planet is a Karaka, and then you just want to look at what it rules, which is a house, whether it rules a Karaka, whether it rules a house lord. And then you want to look at the planets it rules from the said Karaka, from the said house lord. And then there's also something called Bhavam. So let's say we're looking at fourth house things like we are going to. Well, what is the fourth house counted from the fourth house? Well, that is the seventh house. So the seventh house, if a planet has a seventh house agenda, then it very well may be a planet that is making that event come to pass. So just keep these in mind, because we're going to show that. And then we're also going to show how a planet Rashi aspecting a house and a planet Rashi aspecting a house lord can also help to make an event manifest. And what's really important to know is that with these bottom two here, this is really Jupiter and Mercury. If Jupiter and Mercury are manifesting a house or a house lord, then that has a huge chance of manifesting. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the first chart. So the first chart here, what we're looking at is we're going to be looking at this person's Jupiter Dasha. And, we always want to always take into consideration obvious things like age. Because if the person's 7 years old and we're looking at their Dasha of when, for example, this person's Venus Dasha, are they going to buy a house? Possibly near the end of it, right? Because they would be 23 years old. But, for the start of it, obviously it's kind of a moot point. But anyway, we're looking at this person's Jupiter Dasha, at which they're 64, between the ages of 64 and 80. So is this person capable? Is their Jupiter have an agenda for a house? Well, when it comes to house, right away we know that Jupiter is not the Karaka for real estate. Mars is the Karaka for real estate. And then we're looking at the fourth house. Well, Jupiter doesn't rule the fourth house. It rules the 9th and the 12th here. Now, Jupiter does, however, rule Mars. Jupiter does, however, rule the fourth lord, which is the moon in this case. So Jupiter, therefore, has an agenda for making real estate happen. And we know this because planets are always manifesting what is in their Rashi. This is what they're looking to produce. Jupiter's two Rashis, and the Rashis, I always say the Rashis as containers because they contain the things in the house. So they contain the houses, the things in the chart. They contain the houses, they contain the karakas, they contain the house lords. And so Jupiter has two containers, and that's what he was going to produce, the things that are in his containers. And so he just so happens to have Mars, the karaka, and Moon, the fourth lord. So the answer is yes, the Jupiter Dasha can do it. Now, which of the two Bhuktis, or of the which Bhuktis do you think it's going to produce a house in? Well, of the 9 different possible planetary lords. Well, let's look at it. Well, obviously we know that Mars, Jupiter Mars, because Jupiter rules Mars and Mars is the karaka. Jupiter Moon, because Moon is the fourth lord and Jupiter rules the fourth lord. So those are the two strongest right away without having to look at it. When you see the Mahadasha lord ruling the said karaka or the said house lord, then we know that Antardasha has a very, very specific time where that energy is going to be coming into manifestation. Very, very highly likely. So what else? So besides just Jupiter, besides just Moon and Mars and Jupiter, well, what else do we have? Well, we have the fourth counted from Mars is 1, 2, 3, 4 would be Gemini. So we would see that K2 is in Gemini. So K2 would have an agenda for a house. We know that Mercury rules Gemini. So Mercury has an agenda. We also know that the fourth from the fourth lord, which is the Moon, well, that's also ruled by Jupiter. So there's another instance of Jupiter. We know that Jupiter is also Rashi aspecting the fourth house here, which that tells us that Jupiter has an even stronger agenda for making fourth house things happen. And then finally, we come to Bhavat Bhavam. And Bhavat Bhavam is the house counted from the house. So we're talking about the fourth house. So the fourth from the fourth is the seventh, and Venus rules the seventh. So now, which is the strongest? When could we really see right here is going to be, and if you know about Vimshottari Dasa and the cycle and the way that the planet's natural function goes, it goes K2, Venus, Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury. So with that being said, when you know that, when I was talking this whole time about Moon, Mars, I was automatically like, that makes a lot of sense. Those two karakas, Jupiter, Moon, Jupiter, Mars are right after each other. And it just so happens that this person bought a house in July of 2015. Right at near the start of July of 2015, which would put it in Jupiter, Moon, and very close starting is Jupiter, Mars. So that makes a lot of sense. See, it's right there. And then if we were to look at the third Bhuktian, we would actually see that the house was actually bought right here in early July in Jupiter, Moon, Venus. And Venus has the Bhavam by ruling the seventh house. So we see how all of that works. And you're like, well, Venus doesn't sound like it has the strongest agenda. Well, when this person was actually looking to purchase a house, when they actually were really looking for it, was during Jupiter, Moon, Mercury, and Jupiter, Moon, K2, which is the time where it was the fourth from the karaka. The fourth counted from Mars. And we talked about K2 and Mercury. So and then you'll see here, you have Mercury, K2, Venus. You have this huge run of fourth house antardashas. So this is how we can kind of look to see of when things happen. But what's also important is to take into consideration when we're talking about property and we're talking about land and we're talking about something that's wealth, we want to look at the Chaturtamsha, which the Chaturtamsha is also known as the D4, which is basically like it's basically like diving into the fourth house. It's the fourth Varga chart. So again, we see that Jupiter here in the Chaturtamsha still looks very similar to the Rashi chart, right? We see that Jupiter rules Mars. So we know that Jupiter still has a real estate agenda. we see that Moon still rules the 4th house. So right away, we see Jupiter Moon period and Jupiter Mars period looking just as obvious. We also see that Venus is still ruling the 7th cusp here. So Venus still has the Bhavam. We see that Mercury in this chart rules the Moon. And the Moon is the 4th lord. So we see that Mercury has an even stronger agenda for producing a house. And we can see why that Jupiter, Moon, Mercury is when this person started getting involved. See, this is where when we start diving into the Vargas, we start seeing why Jupiter, Moon, Mercury was so important. And so now let's just go ahead and dive into the other chart that I have here, which the other chart that I have is my chart. And we're going to look at when I bought a scooter. Now, at the time, the scooter was brand new. This is a motorized scooter that cost about $3,000. So it was a decent purchase. So now, this happened in Rahu Dasha. So let's take a look. And then the reason why I wanted to use this too is because a lot of times when we get into looking at Vimshottari Dasa and we start talking about the nodes of Rahu and Ketu, it can be very confusing. Oh, what's Rahu going to produce? What's Rahu Dasha going to do? What's Ketu Dasha going to do? Well, just think about it very simple. Remember how earlier I talked about Rashi being a container? When you're thinking of Rahu and Ketu, just think of them in the nature of the Rashi, the container that they're in. And anything that they're in is going to be what they are looking to produce. So with Rahu here, Rahu and Libra, we're going to want, Rahu is going to be producing all the things that the Lord of Libra is going to be producing. And what's the Lord of Libra? Well, the Lord of Libra is Venus. And Venus is the natural Karaka for vehicles and conveniences and things that make it easier, make our lives easier, basically. And so we see right away that just because Rahu is in Libra and its lord is Venus, it has a natural inclination to want to produce Venusian things. So that right away tells us. And so now let's look at 4th house things. So we want to look at what's the 4th lord. The 4th lord here is Mercury. So we see right away that Rahu, Venus, and Mercury. And then we see that Jupiter's in the 4th house. And we see that Jupiter rules the 4th lord, Mercury. So Rahu, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter. And then we want to look at the 4th from the Karaka. So the 4th from the Karaka is Venus. I'm sorry, is Aries. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we have Ketu in Aries. So Ketu is going to have an agenda for vehicles. We also see that Mars is going to have an agenda for vehicles because Mars rules Aries. And then we want to look at the 4th from the 4th lord, which is Pisces here, which is Jupiter. So we see Jupiter has a very, very, very strong agenda for vehicles as well. Now, and then we want to look at the Bhavam, which is the 7th house, which Mercury rules the 7th house. So Mercury's got an even stronger agenda here. And we see that Jupiter's Rashi aspecting Mercury and Mercury's Rashi aspecting Jupiter. And both of those planets tied to the 4th house makes both of those times very, very, very likely to produce vehicles. So let's get into this. And so now we see that Rahu, Mercury, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and even Saturn here has an agenda for vehicle. So basically the 2 planets that don't really have an agenda for vehicles are Sun and Moon. So now let's get into it. But what it really sounds like, doesn't it, is that Rahu-Mercury period. Dun, dun, dun. Sure enough, Rahu-Mercury in March of 2015 is when I bought this scooter. Oh, it makes a lot of sense. Mercury, we saw how many times Mercury is connected to the 4th house. And we saw that Rahu is connected to the 4th house. So why don't we go ahead and look at the 3rd bhukti, or the Pratyantra Dasha. Let's find 2015. March of 2015 was in Rahu, Mercury, Rahu. So that makes sense because we know that Rahu is ruled by Venus. So in a way, this is kind of like saying Venus, Mercury, Venus. And yes, that's absolutely adequate. So we see that that is a very logical time. Now, the next question I would have is, what Varga do we look at for confirmation here? Well, we are going to want to look at the Chaturtamsha. No, because the Chaturtamsha is things that are basically providing wealth. Because vehicles are the opposite of wealth, actually. Vehicles are about basically making our lives easier. That's why we own vehicles, because vehicles do not... If we have wealth, we buy vehicles, basically. But they do not provide... They're one of the things that... they make our lives better, but they do not bring us more wealth. They just go down in value. It's actually the Shodamsha Varga, the 16th Varga. Because the Shodamsha is all about... Very similar to 4th house. And if you look at it, 16 is 4 squared, if you want to get mathematical with it. But it's more about, the 16th Varga is about times in our lives that things are going to become easier for us, like easing our burden in life, which Venus is a very important karaka for the 16th Varga. So anyhow, let's look at the same thing. So let's see which planets have the 4th house agenda here. Well, we see Jupiter right away rules the 4th house. See that because it's right here in the 4th house also. And then we also see, so Jupiter right away has a huge agenda. And then we see we have Rahu in this example is ruled by Mercury. But wait, Rahu itself isn't influencing the 4th house. But what we will see here is that, remember I told you that earlier in the video, I told you that Jupiter and Mercury, whatever houses and whatever karakas are in those Rashis that they're Rashi aspecting, then Jupiter and Mercury are looking to make those things happen. Well, it just so happens Mercury here is Rashi aspecting Venus. And so Mercury has an agenda for that. And if you want to get more technical, there's other reasons, actually. I really don't want to dive into it here of why Mercury has a very strong agenda for the 4th house also. But anyhow, in this we see that the 4th from the 4th is the 7th, and Mercury actually rules the Bhavam. I forgot about that. Mercury rules the 7th house, which is like I said, the 4th from the 4th, the Bhavam Rashi. So Mercury has that going forward as well. So Rahu, and Mercury is the ruler of Rahu. That's why we're talking about Mercury. So very important to see how this can show and how this can manifest and why this happened during this time. So this is just the beginning of examples of making predictions. I'm actually going to come back to these 2 charts in later videos because I'm going to look at a couple of other things. I haven't decided exactly how many videos I want to do. I'm definitely going to do a video predicting with transits, and I'll do a video about, I kind of pause here because there's so much when it comes to Varsha Fall to really teach. That's going to be really hard to condense into a 20-30 minute video. I'll do my best. I'll do my best. And because I use Varsha Fall, I use transits, I use Vimshottari Dasa when I'm going to make predictions. I use other dashas as well. Sometimes I use Jaimini's Rashi dashas to see when to find confluence. It's the more technical you can get, the more ways that you can see things happening, the more likely the prediction is going to be. Because when I've showed you this, when I show you Vimshottari Dasa is just kind of like, okay, this is very possible at this time. And it's when we actually get into the transits, when transits are actually coming right over things and triggering things, basically, is when we can get more specific to the time and understanding of how these things are working and manifesting. Anyways, this video has been long enough already. I hope you find this valuable and helpful, and thank you for taking the time to watch this, and namaste.